Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn. This is a program from the Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network. My name is Joanne Viewig, and I'm president of the organization. The format for today is a brief overview of the topic, followed by a question-answer period with our panelists. And I would like for them to introduce themselves to you. Would you like to start?
Sure, I'm Emily Fuller-Hansen. I am a child and adolescent therapist here at Prairie St. John's, and I'm currently over at our partial hospitalization program. We just started a new program 2 weeks ago. This is week number 2 for us, which is very exciting. And it's specifically geared for kids on the autism spectrum. And so it's separate from our existing partial program, and our goal is to work with these kids a little bit longer and really help with good transition planning back to schools and to their other programs.
I'm Brandon Booth, and I live with autism, and I am on the spectrum.
My name is John Fody. I also have Asperger's syndrome. I'm on the spectrum. I am the video editor for our organization here. I am on the Speakers Bureau for our organization here, and I do freelance speaking on the subject, which I've done multiple times before in various cities, and always look forward to doing it again.
My name is Tony Philman. I'm the Executive Director for Specialist Care in Midwest.
I'm Bridget Haynes. I'm a transition facilitator with the Transition Independence program through Southeast Youth Service Center.
I'm Chris McEwen. I'm on the board of directors of the RRVAN and also of AS.
I'm Jennifer Stroh, and I'm the District Autism Specialist for the West Fargo Schools.
Thank you. Our topic for today is developing independence. According to the American Heritage College Dictionary, independence means self-sufficient, not reliant on others for support, care, or funds. Well, I consider myself a very independent person. I've been successful in my life. I've raised a family. I've had numerous what I consider important jobs, but I don't see myself completely non-reliant on other people. So I found this, which I think is a better definition of what independence is. Self-sufficiency implies the person participates in the community in meaningful and satisfying ways, where meaningful and satisfying are defined by his or her preferences, strengths, and needs. That to me is a much more realistic definition. It actually comes from Transition to Independence program materials, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So as we're talking about independence and helping ourselves and our loved ones develop independence, we can think about it in a variety of different areas. And these are just some of the ones that I identified. Taking care of oneself and your living space is important for having a comfortable lifestyle, particularly after if the person chooses to leave the family home and live independently that way. It's also important in the workspace, having respect for how you look and present yourself to others, as well as this place, the area in which you work. It matters to you and to other people how you do that. Being organized, taking care of things, getting places on time, having materials you need. Shopping, food, these are important things to be able to take care of. Money management, particularly for the young people that we are concerned about, learning to advocate for your needs, recognizing what they are, and being able to say, this is what I need. Communicating effectively. This is important for all of us. I just had a big to-do recently last week where a person and I were talking about two completely different things and didn't understand that we really meant the same thing. It was a communication glitch. It happens to everybody, but particularly for the young people that we care about, that can really be a challenge for them to make sure that they're communicating as effectively as they need to. And then being independent, in being ready for a job or career. That's another area to look that we look at. Where does it start then to develop independence? Well, as a mother and a grandmother, I believe this starts from the time they're very, very little. We start learning these skills from a very young age, and caregivers help teach and help the other person learn these skills from a very young age, and they're kind of folded into our everyday life. And a lot of times we don't even realize what we're doing is helping lead someone toward mastering skills that help them be more independent. The thing that's important, I think, particularly though when we're talking about our loved ones on the autism spectrum, is that we do need to be very purposeful and attentive to these skills and how we teach them, not just assume that they'll pick them up. Because we know that a number of folks on the spectrum have difficulty learning just by things happening around them. It helps a lot to be shown in a pointed manner. It's also important for us to remember that all of us learn and develop skills and mastery at a little bit at a time. When we're teaching things, it helps to break things down into smaller pieces. One thing I can think of, for example, was when my daughter was little and I said, go clean up your room. She just looked at me with these big eyes like, what? Well, I realized I needed to say, she was 4, I needed to say, pick up all the toys on the floor and put them in the toy box. That was step 1. I also wanted her to pull up the blankets on her bed. We also made it a simple task to make your bed, because I read this in some parenting book where if they just have blankets to pull up and put the pillow on top, that's an easy way for a young child to learn to make a bed. So that's how we taught her to make her bed. And we broke it into steps. Pull up the blankets, put your pillow on top. And you know, it sounds kind of simplistic, but that's really how our little kids learn. And we do these kinds of things all the time. All of us like praise. It's important to recognize steps toward the goal. Patience and time are really important as well. I asked a parent of a young man who's now in college, who's on the spectrum, if she could come, and she wasn't able to come today, but she wanted to be sure and share some of her ideas, and her main line was time. Give yourself time and give the young person time to learn. That's patience and time are really important. And then all of us learn best, I think, in a natural setting. Where life happens is the best way to learn new skills. One of the things I meant to mention earlier when we were looking at areas of independence is learning to advocate for yourself and what your needs are often means recognizing what's going on for you. And one of the tools that we hear people talk about a lot is the 5-point scale. And I just wanted to show you what that looks like. This is one that someone created for a person who was on the job and was stating it on the job. And basically what this does is help a person start to recognize, well, if I'm at a 1, this is what it looks like. I feel kind of normal, I'm okay, I'm calm, I feel good, and I want to stay here because I like being in this mood. But if something is getting to them because they made a mistake, they may be up to a 3. And what it looks like to people watching is their teeth might be grinding, punching their jaw, starting to feel anxious. Well, the person who's helping this person learn how they're feeling or reacting to something could notice that grinding of the teeth or clenching of the jaw or making a fist and say, I see that you're clenching your jaw. That looks to me like you might be anxious. Is that right? And then they can start learning how to use this tool. And then this is the final column is how to respond to that. So how many of you are familiar with this tool? Have you heard of that before? It's really good for, I see it as a teaching tool, and then once the person becomes familiar with these, then they can use it. And I'm at a 4. I'm going to need some help in dealing with this. Anyway, that's why I put that on there, just because we hear people talk about it a lot, and this is really what it looks like. The next thing I think is important to think about is how do we teach skills? Well, being very specific in describing what it is you want them to do. Pick up all the toys that are on the floor and put them in the toy box. That's what I want you to do. Look at the recipe list and take out all of the equipment you'll need just before you start cooking. That's a very descriptive kind of description of what's needed, and then you go back and you say very specifically, you got all of those things out ahead of time, and you knew what to do next. You were ready. Or for the child who cleaned up, your room looks so nice. Every one of your toys is put away in the toy box. That kind of thing. So you're kind of reinforcing again what you have already said, so they know specifically what it is you've done right. I'm a retired teacher, and one of the things that I learned to do early on was give specific feedback. Not, this is really a nice story that you wrote. Well, that's nice to hear. But as the teacher, it was more helpful to my student for me to say, I really like this story because the characters seem very real. This person reminds me of somebody I know, something like that. Or you used really descriptive words. If it was an older child, I would say, I love the adjectives that you use to describe. Those kinds of things. So they know specifically what they're doing right. Sometimes you have to kind of help somebody know why it's important to learn something. I remember when my daughter was going from junior high to high school, I was telling her that she had to pay attention to how she spoke to other people, that things sounded rude, and that wasn't okay. And she said, well, oh no, I'm sorry, it had to do with her clothing. How you dress makes a difference, because she was like to be really, really sloppy. And she said, why? I said, well, how you present yourself, people get an opinion of you based on what you look like. And she says, well, they shouldn't judge me for that. They should judge me for what I'm like on the inside. What difference does that make? And it took me a long time to figure out how to turn that into a way that made sense, that she got why it was important. You know, as she got older, she figured out that if she didn't present in a certain way, she wouldn't be considered for a job interview or that kind of thing. But helping give real life examples is always useful. And then learning the concept in a natural setting or a simulated setting that's really close to the real thing. I was talking with my grandson not long ago about not being kind of sarcastic or smart-alecky in his responses to things, that it didn't go over well, didn't sit well with people. Well, this is Grandma talking, it didn't seem to matter much. Well, he was at his job. I'm so proud of him. He's 15 and he has a job, which is probably one of the best life skill learning situations he's ever been in. And someone was rude to him, a customer was rude to him. And he said, all right, I'll take care of it, whatever it was she wanted. And then as he walked away, he said, under my breath, I said, yes, Your Highness, yes, Your Highness. And the person heard him and said, watch it, kid. So we had a perfect opportunity then at home to say, you know, what was the consequence? What could have happened to you if, you know, she had complained to your supervisor had heard that? oh, I would have probably got fired. Okay, that's a reason that we don't say those sarcastic or nasty things like that in our voice, because it has can have a negative consequence for us. And it was like, oh, and like that, there was a change in that attitude in a lot of other places as well. But that natural setting was the place that he learned that better than talking about it by itself. I already mentioned a little bit about giving specific instructions and demonstrations. Practicing something ahead of time. When kids are little, a lot of times we'll go over. Now, when we go to the playground at McDonald's, you're going to see a lot of people. It's okay. They're going to share spaces. When it's time to go home, I'm going to say, come on down, it's time to go home. And what are you going to say? And my grandson would always go, because he never wanted to leave. So we practiced the words he would say back to me, and a couple of times, and we always did it right before we got out of the car to go to, and it began to work. So you can start that at a young age, but it also works when they're older. And again, practicing in a variety of settings, learning a new skill, it's important to be able to generalize it. One thing, another strategy is that one of the evidence-based strategies that works really well is videotaping and practicing something, seeing something the way it's supposed to be done, and then watching it over and over again. That helps counteract some of the garbage that kids see on television, and young adults. But the videotaping, and kids really like that, particularly kids who get into, I'm sorry, I call you adults kids too. I'm a grandmother. You're all kids to me, so I don't mean to be demeaning. People who like technology can really get into this. Oh, let's do something with this. Videotape themselves in a scenario that works, and then keep looking at it. That's another way. The thing to remember is that growing toward independence is an ongoing process. We're all doing it all the time. It's important to encourage personal growth, and the use of positive approaches is so much more effective than punitive ones. I mean, sometimes they're built in, like getting fired if you're rude. But the positives are the way that most people learn the best. And finding support systems and using them. And this I think applies to caregivers as well as people learning the new skills. We all need support. I would like for you to look at, I should probably put that back up, the handouts here. I just wanted you to see that some specific strategies and suggestions for teaching our learning skills is on one of your handouts. Just some examples of things that work. That you might not even realize that you're doing on a daily basis, and then you can maybe learn to expand those. And then there's a paper that shows resources that you were able to pull together from the local movement, and several of our panelists represent some of those resources. So I'd like to open this up to questions from our panelists. Anybody have something you'd like us to explore a little further? Or a comment from you?
Yeah, I'll say something. You know, I think it's interesting, the list of things there that you had for skills for getting through transition, right? So you talked about videotaping, but it was, I don't know, it's 4 or 5 slides in. I have the slides here in front of me. A little at a time, so break each into smaller pieces. You know, we're an employer, right? And so we work with individuals who are on the autism spectrum, and we always try to figure this out in the context of what is the world of work really, right? And what I would say is if you would look at that, that's a good technique for training anybody into a job, right? Like if you were, somebody's coming to your workforce, no matter what the job would be, no matter how highly skilled that job is, You don't just say, okay, go do the job. You know, they have to learn the pieces of the job. So to be an effective supervisor, those would be things that you would want to have as a person, right? So I think as I look at that, I go, wow, isn't that interesting that if you wanted to be a more effective supervisor of a person in a job, you would use descriptive praise, right? Not just good job today, but good job on that thing, right? And that's good supervisory technique for all people. And so I think it's interesting to really consider, do you do that? Do you get that at your job? You know, and if not, oh, that's a great place to learn, to start to change.
Does anybody on the panel have any like suggestions of maybe things that you could think of that specifically aided you in feeling like you were gaining some skills toward independence?
Well, I guess for me, because I've spent 6 years fighting, and not fighting, I guess, I'm going to court for my own guardianship, and I finally won my case, so it was a big, big victory for me to get that independence for my mom and everybody. It was a long battle.
Well, that's something interesting you bring up that we didn't mention in the body of this presentation, which is guardianship is one, I think, support mechanism that families often will put into place to help make sure that the person is safe, shall we say, as a security measure. And yet, you reached a point then where it was like, okay, I got this now. I want to do this on my own. Took a lot of advocating, didn't it, to get there?
I took 3 meetings with a lawyer, 3 meetings with a district attorney and a county attorney to get an agreement reached.
Can you think of any, I'm going to put you on the spot by asking you a cold question like this, but can you think of any specific things that helped you learn to be able to do that advocating for yourself?
Just being ready and just get having myself information, reading the books, how the laws are stated.
So the time was right, and you looked into what you needed to know in order to do it. That's important for a lot of things. To be ready. I think you've really come up with an important thing is readiness, you know. Sometimes we really want I'll speak as a parent, we want our children to do this, be ready to do this. And if they're not ready, chances are it's not going to be successful. Or they may not try. Or we may want something different for them than what they want. If you remember back to the definition that I prefer, it's being in the world, in the community, in the way that's comfortable for them. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. My mother really wanted me to go to college, to have a career to fall back on in case my husband died early. It wasn't that both my parents expected me to go to college and get married. Start a family. Well, that was not exactly what I had in mind. And it became clear to them that when I got in my car and drove all the way to Massachusetts for my first job. So it was like, oh, so they had to learn to let go for one thing. But they had to kind of come to grips with the fact that this is what I wanted. And it's kind of like what you were saying. You were ready, and this is what you wanted to do. So, thank you. Chris, you've been very independent almost all of your life. Is there any insight you can give us into what's helped you be successful?
Well, well, my parents were military based, so off the get-go, so a lot of independent providing that I've had to do myself even before I went to high school. I had a job similar to your son since I've been 15 plus if you count the paper route what I did when I was like 10 or 11, I suppose. But so I've been working for pretty much most of my life in some capacity or another. I've been working as an independent contractor on and off for the past 7 years, and you can't really screw up if you're an independent contractor, because once you do that, then you lose your contracts and you lose your ability to feed yourself. So you learn a lot of life skills when you're your own boss, and you actually need to effectively be your own boss in order to not screw up and, obviously not be able to afford rent. But I didn't look like, I think I always had this drive though to be independent though. I intentionally picked NDSU originally because it was the farthest college away from home, without leaving the state of North Dakota. It was 4.5 hours away from Minot, which is where I went to high school. So from there, I guess that's how I learned all the skills. I don't know if there's anything else we need.
So you made specific choices that would lead you in that direction, and you got jobs. I'm glad you brought that up, because I mentioned just briefly, I think it's really important to encourage our young people to get a job. And I'm speaking from personal experience, from Chris's experience, and Temple Grandin, who's like the guru for those of us learning about autism. She says, get a job. From junior high is not too young an age to start. It could be walking the dogs to the neighbor's dogs. It could be helping paint somebody's house in the summer. Something where they have to set up and work with other people, talk to somebody, set up the job, keep a schedule, earn some money. You learn a lot by actually doing the job. And it's not that this job will be what you're going to do all of your life, but it's a way to start learning things about life and about the world of work.
Joanne?
Yes.
I was just going to expand on that. I don't think it has to be paid work. I think volunteer experiences, working with organizations or other groups or activities, also teach those skills too. That the paid employment is not always best for everybody, especially at different places, but looking for some kind of opportunity in an area of interest can also teach some of those same skills that you're talking about, maybe a little different.
Good point. Does not necessarily have to be paid.
Right.
But that does add an advantage to learning a little bit about money as well. But
even
you're right.
in school, being part of a club or an extracurricular activity or something like that, just sort of expands some of those.
Building off of that, if I may, that is really, really helpful. In high school and in college, I was in DECA, a marketing group organization, a part of the marketing class type thing, and that's a volunteer organization. I got into the leadership hierarchy there as vice president of the club, and I learned a lot of independence there with running the meetings, planning things, organizing things. So yeah, like Barb said, even a club in a school can also give you some experience too, and I found that to be very helpful as well.
I just have a question for the three of you that are on the spectrum. What was the most challenging, or I'll say challenging, what was the most challenging component of transitioning from being in a school setting to moving to the next phase in your life?
I went through the OSP program, Brainerd. I don't know if anyone's heard of that.
It's an occupational skills program.
I heard my junior year in high school, I started looking into the program and started working on transitioning out. And my senior year, when I turned 18, I moved out of my own house. And I moved to my own apartment, and then that following year, I moved down to Brainerd, and I learned very, very early that being independent was very important.
I think the most challenging thing was learning how to really just I think, set my own life priorities. And extend, or at least extend to the little things, such as remembering to shower, remembering to do a lot of the social norm stuff. I mean, the other stuff, I mean, the schools, the college stuff, so because for me the next step was college, but the class stuff, you know, was a no-brainer. I never had problems with that sort of stuff. But it was the social norm stuff that was probably the biggest challenge to adjust to. I didn't have my mother reminding me that perhaps I should shower so people don't be mad with me. You know, just, it sounds so basic to all of you, and awesome if it is basic to you, but that stuff never came to me. It's gotten to the point where a lot of times I have to actually schedule reminders to brush my teeth. Because for whatever reason, even though I'm 29, I still, for the life of me, cannot remember to brush my teeth on my own. Because I'm too busy thinking about, I don't know, whatever computer software program I'm trying to write today.
So you write a schedule for yourself, for routines and things at home?
Yeah, if I need to. I have a very basic list. Like, I don't actually calendar 7:45 is when I brush my teeth, because that would just drive me insane. I tried that, but I did, however, try that for about a year and a half. I found out it drove me kind of insane seeing on a calendar 7:45 is when I brush my teeth, but I do have a basic checklist to make sure that, yes, did I brush my teeth today, so that way I don't build up cavities? Yes, I did. Did I shower? Yes, I did.
So, see, these things we start with our young kids really help. I write everything down for myself. I write it down on a list. Things I'm going to do for today. These are things that everybody does, but for some of us they're more important than others. Jennifer and Bridget, you each work with young people at kind of different stages of this transitioning out of school. Do you have some suggestions or observations you've made of what you think is helpful?
Sure. We have, at school, we're always trying to teach independence depending on the student's level of integration in our school buildings. We teach them independence through completing their assignments, getting their work done. But as they get older, we also start to teach them that advocating piece of being able to explain their disability, being able to explain what they need for accommodations or for assistance if they're going into the workforce, if they're going into college. You know, they need to be able to report to the disabilities office at college, and they don't want mom and dad coming with them. And if they do, they still want to hear it from the student that's applying to the college or going to start there about my disability is autism or whatever the disability might be. And then listing out, you know, I need help, like I'm not going to be able to keep up with the notes, or I need a quiet place to take the test. So being able to explain those things is something that we work hard at high school, and having kids learn how to do that before they leave us so that they're ready.
Would you say this is a typical kind of thing that families can expect as part of the transition work at high school for our kids that are on IEPs or 504 cents?
I
That's
think
a part of their programming.
Yeah, it
isn't
should
it?
be a part of their programming. And if you find that it's not, I mean, it's something that you can easily ask to have added in.
Ask for, and it's not an unreasonable thing. I think that's the important thing for a lot of us to remember, is that when we're advocating for these things, these are not unreasonable expectations, and obviously the schools have them in
Yes.
place. So just
And-
accessing them may be the trick.
I'm looking for some suggestions. Got a 16-year-old son this month, real active, but he's not very verbal. But he likes mechanical type stuff. He likes to use power drills and stuff like that. And I'd like to see him working half a day and then doing school half a day. I think he does way too much school and he doesn't have enough meaningful activity. And so I'm wondering, is there anything like that around in the area? I don't care if he got paid or not, just if he had something constructive to do.
You mean as part of his school day?
Well, it credited to his school day, but it wouldn't actually.
Yes, there is a program. Even in my high school, there was a co-op employment, I think they called it, and you can go through it with your high school, and you can get a accredited class in which you would actually work for an employer, and the teacher running that program would check with the employer, and they would come to an agreement on a grade for that class. So they would get work experience, and then also get an actual grade in the class, and that will go directly to your credits to graduation.
So do the parents have to go and find a suitable kind of work, or is their work already set up and then they can
Do you know about that, Marsha?
Yeah, at West Fargo High, we have the Career and Tech Ed department, and I think typically the kids have to be on an IEP for it, but it is exactly as he was saying, is that you have school part of the day. The first semester, perhaps they'll do some job shadowing, they'll do some interest inventories, find out what it is they're good at, what they like, what skills they have, what skills they maybe need some boosting with, and then the second semester, they typically go out and work a portion of the day. And like you said, they follow up with the employer, they do some checklists, they do some monitoring, but they're able to get that work experience and earn credit for it towards graduation. It's an excellent program, so whatever school you're at, if you can check into whether they have a career tech ed program. I'm not sure, maybe some of the smaller schools all do, I don't know. I would think they would.
Yeah, sometimes it's just knowing that that kind of program is available. And we can always request that our student have a shorter school day, and then arrange something like this for them. You know, my grandson doesn't do that, but he got the job and had his job for a couple of months, and then we discovered he could get some credit for, that's what it's called now, for that job as an elective. And I don't know who's giving him grades or anything, but he's doing so well, we're not anticipating there's any problem. But that's an important piece of what he does, and that we kind of set up. I wonder if exploring the courses that are of interest to him and making sure those get into his schedule would be another way maybe to access some of that.
Okay.
Yes, Marsha?
We are also, and Jen can attest to this, she's been part of setting it up at West Fargo High, we're also setting up social skills, a social skills class specifically geared towards being ready for the workplace. And I actually wanted to kind of ask, we have a curriculum that's kind of being developed, and it's sort of in, it's like this next semester starting Monday is our pilot group. So there are guinea pigs at this. But what I wanted to ask, it actually had the whole panel, both as the student who would be getting that instruction and as an employer who would be looking at hiring someone. What is something that you wish you had known prior to leaving school, you know, that you would have been taught? And what is it that as an employer are really kind of that basic, gotta have this for me to take a look at you kind of skills? You know, you talked about the hygiene and things like that, and really we're still really working on that. Sometimes it's the sensory, you know, not liking the feel of those showers or whatever, but what is it you wish you knew, and what is it you wish they knew?
John, you wanted to say something a little bit earlier. Was it kind of related to this?
That was now.
Oh,
I'll
sorry.
get back to it later. I'll get back to it later.
Well, you've done some interesting things. I mean, you've learned some things through, from what you described, your interest areas and your clubs and things like that, and then you've also kind of created your own job in your independent work. What
Right. Yeah.
what has helped lead to that?
Well, one thing was the extracurriculars in high school, organizations that helped me learn some more independence, organization tools, and self-motivations. And then also after high school, joining organizations within the community, a Toastmasters group, to also help me, you know, develop skills was very helpful, and just taking it step by step, not just diving into something like that, just, you know, like we said before, breaking it down into smaller pieces so it's a bit more manageable to learn, so you don't overload your brain right away.
Did anybody feel the need or the lack of information about like how to greet other people, like in the workplace, or introduce yourself, or
Used to have
be that
that,
way?
but again, I was in a marketing and business extracurricular, so we kind of learned that stuff early on, and that was very helpful. So
It's embedded into
it was
what
embedded
you-
into the
Excellent.
classwork. So I lucked out in having a group that kind of taught you that social skills and settings, which of course is even more valuable for a person on the spectrum, since we generally have more difficulty with that to begin with in the first place. But learning that in high school, that was really a very, very good resource to have.
I think an important kernel. So we hire individuals who are on the spectrum, so we expect some obstacles, right? If there weren't any obstacles, they wouldn't need us. What we're expecting, though, is right at the heart of it is a desire to work. And I see both. I do see individuals who are on the spectrum, they don't want to work. And I don't have a problem with that per se, but I can't put that want to in them. Right? So if they want to work, having a way to express that, even if it's written, would be helpful. If they can express it verbally, fantastic. But I think, you know, many people are sensitive, particularly in an entry-level job, so a first job. Employers are pretty sensitive. The person sitting in front of them is likely not skilled at interviewing, that they don't have a lot of experience in life. They can live through a lot of that stuff. But they need to know that the person who's sitting there is going to want to do this job. It's going to, you know, for what it is. You know, so like if you worked at McDonald's when you were a kid, it wasn't a great job. But you went because, you know, every week or two you got a paycheck, and that was nice, right? So it was a nice thing to have, right? And you knew that, but that was the want to in it. So did I want to work at McDonald's? I don't know if I wanted to, but I could express, I will do this because I know what the reward is. So I think that skill in itself, that first kernel, do you even want to work, and figuring out how to express that is really important.
So along with that advocacy piece, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to get a job if the
Right.
person,
Okay.
and maybe here's the glorious part, so many people on the autism spectrum are very clear in their communication, and you can just flat out ask, do you really want to work? Nope. Well, I guess we've completed the interview. You don't want it. You have no desire to be here, right? You know, so I think.
And I think as they're exploring this whole idea, there are reasons beyond getting a paycheck for working.
Well, that's what I think, that we should make sure our kids know that it's their responsibility as community members to contribute to the community, regardless of what your skill set is. So I think that is kind of the attitude that we should be instilling. There are days I don't want to work either, but I know that it's my responsibility to get up, get ready, and go to work. And so, even taking it back further from what you're saying, it's like, hey, it's our responsibility to contribute to our society,
Sure.
and our community, and our families, and whatever level they're at. So you need to do this. This is one thing that's not a choice. You know, I give choices all the time, but guess what? This isn't a choice. It's your responsibility.
And within that responsibility, there are things that are really rewarding.
Absolutely.
You know, some things feel really good to be able to do this.
And if you don't try it, you're not going to know that.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
You learn by giving it a try. I always say half the education of going to college is learning what you don't want to do, because that's just as important as knowing what you do want to do. Bridget, you work with people that are a little bit farther away from high school, right?
Most of the youth I work with are out of high school. So it's navigating many systems. Many want to be living on their own, and how to do that. So I work individually with them, step by step, and showing them how to do things. If it's living on their own and they maybe don't know how to pay, we're going to set schedules. I'm going to go over to their apartment, find them a
I'll help them. And I'll do
That's
this.
clean, did you say?
Yep, I've cleaned for and then too, and recognizing that, you know, safety and health wise, like their clean might not be my clean, but if it's healthy and safe, they've got to know kind of.
I could say as a mother, I get that. My adult kids don't always have to say, you know, about that. But yes, that's important. So even those basic life, taking care of yourself skills are important.
A lot of one-on-one and doing the job with them. And then, you know, giving them some space to try it on their own. And if they're able to, you know, if they're successful with that, great, and check in. And if not, then continue to do it.
Do you have some ideas of resources for families as they're looking for supports for their, and people who are trying to learn these skills or who are ready, as Brandon mentioned, to do that up here, but maybe don't have all the skills yet? Do you have some resources?
Well, like Freedom Resource Center offers independent skills groups.
Oh,
here. Freedom Resource Center offers independent living skills groups in Fargo, and they have a 3-series, and they do it's related to employment and advocacy. And I have been part of the classes, so I'm not sure if skills related to independence. And that's their whole agency is related to helping people be more independent and self-sufficient. As far as the youth side, like Youth Works and Fraser's Stepping Stones, we work with the youth, provide some case management and helping them navigate with the systems and helping them with what their needs are. So if they're on their own already, getting connected with social services.
Helping them learn what those resources are as well. Barb?
Hi. As I'm listening to everybody talk, I'm just kind of reminded again of how complicated this is. And I started to reflect back on something you were saying, Tony, about people saying, I don't want to work. And to me, it requires going back. I think Emily and I are starting to see things that are happening in really young kids that are going to create some barriers to them working. And I remember working with an adult one time, and we thought we found the perfect job for him. We being me and his vocational rehab counselor. So you see the problem right there. We found the perfect job. And we, being the voc rehab counselor myself, got consistently frustrated because, okay, 2 weeks later you filled out the application. Okay, 3 weeks later got the references. Okay, 4 weeks later, and we're getting close to the closing date on the job. And all of a sudden I realized that, okay, there's something going on here because I'm frustrated and he's the one who's, we're talking about the job for. So I just asked. I said, seems to me that there's something going on here that, you know, maybe you don't want this job. Because he's been saying all along, yes, this is a good job, yes, this is something I think I'd like to do, on and on. And he said, well, when I thought about it, I realized that there are elements of this job that are things that I'm not going to be able to do. So if I apply for the job and I get it, I'm going to end up getting fired or quitting, and then I'm going to have to start searching all over again. And it was just sort of asking that direct question of, okay, what's getting in the way here? And sort of me realizing this is my issue, that I'm getting frustrated and sort of having to dial it back and figure it out. Because what we thought was the perfect job was a job that had a lot of bureaucracy in it, was full-time, a lot of changes and transitions, and didn't even think at that time about what was going on. So sometimes I think when you get frustrated with kids or with adults about that, you kind of take a step back because it's much more complicated than what anybody might think about.
And I think this is a really, several important points come up when you say that. First of all, it needs to be the person needs to be involved in this life decision.
One would think, but you know.
But also, well, I learned early on as a parent, you know, when I cared more about it than she did, maybe it was my problem never. But I think we also need to keep in mind as caregivers that we're talking about a spectrum of abilities, challenges, and we're talking about a spectrum of what independence means. And so maybe we may, along the way, have to kind of tweak what we see as what's best for this particular individual, or encourage them and support them in what they have decided is best for them. Not everyone will be able to do a full-time job. May not be able to do that. Some kids right now in high school can't handle a whole 8-hour day. It's too stressful. That needs to be taken into account. You can be pretty independent and make some money and help support yourself on a part-time job. It's not easy, but these things are possible. We just need to keep that in mind. Margie.
So speaking back to the West Fargo program, in going through the interview process with a lot of these folks, because I work with Tony, and one of the things that I think we can do for them earlier on is really making sure that they know their strengths, and putting them in a context that is outside of school. Because with that black and white thinking, the generalization may not occur, but really understanding that, if you're really detail oriented, if you love building with Legos, there are a lot of jobs out there that you could do, and you could do this, or you could do this, or and really, if you go and you look at the job description, jobs, what's the site, Tony? The one that you showed me, where it translates skills into potential jobs.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. The one ONET is one of them.
Is the one I was
It's
thinking of.
occupational skills.
So if you look at occupational skills and look at their strengths and help them to identify all these possibilities, I think that could be really helpful. Because I've had a lot of interviews where it's like, so, what do you think about you would make you good at IT? I don't know. And then later on they'll say something about how focused they are and how detail-oriented they are. And I'll stop right then and I'll say, just so you know, that is a skill that makes you good at IT, or that could make you good at IT. So I think that having some of those things could be helpful for them in opening their minds to possibilities as to what they might be able to do.
So being able to recognize them and state them. And then what you suggested was get out there in a variety of different places with like-minded people where you kind of explore those things in a safe environment too. So having our kiddos, our young people in activities and clubs and sports, things they may not think they want to do, really can be very valuable, and that is a learning thing toward independence.
Because it's one thing for them to come in and interview with me, because I'm looking past what is presented right here. In other job interviews, they may not have that benefit. And it's not to say that they couldn't be successful without us involved in their work environment, but if they can't get past that interview process, that would be a stumbling block that they won't be able to get past.
I know I went to Menards and I got hired right on the spot. I went and interviewed the same day, and 20 minutes later, entered a boss, the supervisor back, when you want to start.
Awesome.
And they've never dealt with someone that's been on a spectrum. And my supervisor is probably the most as impressed with me as anyone else they have working for them.
I just had a question. Temple Grandin talks about in developing talent, how important it is to have a mentor. And did each of you have a mentor? And if you did, what was it about that person that really helped guide you to the point that you're at today?
Well, did have advisors in school, and I did have that extracurricular activity. I did have a person that did serve as a mentor of sorts and did help me along, kind of learning things about what to come after school, and it was step-by-step, one-on-one help, discussions about what's to be expected, and then kind of going through and practicing the actual motions of some of these things too. So that's my experience.
Chris?
I guess, yeah, I had some, I guess, a few mentors in college, not really in high school so much, but in college that did help with that process in terms of just shoring up in terms of, I mean, again, as I've noted, I really never had any problems with things that weren't socially based in my life. If you just told me to sit down and figure out, I'm a statistics grad student, so anything involving spreadsheets, databases, numbers, I can probably figure out if you give me enough time to notice. I've been told to do even what I thought originally was impossible things, and sure enough, I figured it out. The question is how soon you wanted it. But the social stuff is what I really need help with, and that's where the advice, that's where any mentors that I've had really helped the most, was just shoring up. It's like, Chris, you really need to work on your eye contact, or you need to really clean up your suit. Basic stuff like that just for whatever reason still escapes me to this day, and probably still escapes whatever loved ones in the spectrum. If you're probably here, you're either professional or you have loved ones in the spectrum, right? I'm assuming you're making that assumption, so that's probably a similar situation to what you're all going through.
And if I may also add something, I remember what I was going to say before. Finally. I know from experience, and this is something that you may have to work with, but just to bring some understanding to it, because there are a lot of people that weren't understanding exactly what I was going through at the time, but a lot of people, look upon as graduating high school and college as a very good thing. For me, that was just terrifying. It was scary. The transition of graduating and then moving on to the next thing was paralyzing. And I don't really have a lot of answers about how to get past that, but at least I'm just trying to at least, let you know that if you have a child that is soon to be graduating and they're starting to feel nervous or scared or something like that, I just want to give you the heads up of what it might be.
I think I'm way, way more scared about it. I'm riding the wave. I am horrified. So,
I was saying, if I can add to that, I think for a lot of this, the pacing is really important. And I often find myself reminding myself that I need to work on their metronome and not on mine. I know mine is set really high. I want to get things done. We're moving on. I will think, okay, we don't have time for this, but it's not at my pace because that's where I lose people. And so I really need to match where they're at. If I have kids who need to fill a job application, we'll make photocopies of it first. So we have practice ones, and then we can just transfer that data onto the one that they want to turn in. The idea for some of these transitions, whether it's applying to schools or getting jobs or applying for apartments, there's so much uncertainty in that because we don't know when they're going to call for an interview. We don't know if we're going to get an interview. We don't know when it's going to start, or we don't know which dorm we're going to be in, or how many times can we tour the campus until we feel comfortable. And I think anything we can do to remove the uncertainty is really helpful, but there's still some of those pieces we can't control. I can't call the manager and say, okay, you need to call this person between this time and this time because they're waiting for your call, and that's when they're the most comfortable. And it's a very anxiety-provoking thing to have your cell phone ring and not know that number, but know that you've applied for a handful of jobs and who could be calling. And so we make plans for those moments and do a lot of practice and having, do we keep the applications you've set out by the phone? So if that phone rings, you have the materials you need, or you remember what's what. And it's hard because there's this idea of getting a job, and they might really want that, but there's a lot of steps and uncertainty that come into play before you get to that piece. So anything you can do to prepare for each of those and break them down and reduce the anxiety makes it a lot less fearful and paralyzing. Because I think you're absolutely right, and we work with a lot of people who, even if it's changing grade levels, I'm going to have a new teacher in 5th grade, and I don't want to go to school anymore because I haven't met this person, and so that can be really hard. So anything you can do to remove uncertainty, maybe we attend every back to school night, not just the one we're assigned to because we want to see this teacher a couple of times, or we set up play dates with other kids in the class, or whatever it is. Reducing that anxiety is huge because that can help remove that barrier to, no, I don't want to work, because it's not always about the work. It's about, I don't want that level of stress in my life because there's so much that I don't know if I can do it or not.
Thank you
Where
very
were
much.
you when I was graduating?
I saw a presentation at a conference once, and they said, the two hardest things to really accomplish if you're on the spectrum is getting a job and getting a date. And I thought, number one, those two things are very much alike, right? And then I also thought, that's bad news, right? I mean, because those are two really important things, and that's hard stuff for people on the spectrum to accomplish. The only good news in that is it's hard for everybody to get a job and get a date, right? There aren't really experts on the subject of either, other than a very, very few lucky people. So, I think one of the things that I've always kept in mind is no one is a master of getting a job. Because usually how it works for all of us is we get a job and we're like, whew, I got that job and now I ain't going nowhere, right? I mean, you will live through a lot. So I think it's just important to remember that those two things are really hard. I mean, they're hard for everybody. They present unique challenges for all of us, let alone for those of us who are on the spectrum. So, I mean, it's hard. It's both, frustrating, but also I think should be heartening that, getting a job, getting a date, they're hard. It's hard stuff. Hard stuff to do, and it's very nuanced, so the strategy that works one time doesn't work with another, right? I mean, what worked very well with my wife may not have worked very well with somebody else who I have tried to date, right? Clearly because she married me, and there were plenty who did not.
On that note, our time is up, and we need to end for today. Thank you very, very much, all of you. We're really grateful you were all here. Thank you all for attending, and just keep in mind, all of us need to find our support basis because we're all in this together. It's hard for everybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you.